Namaskar students. Hope you are hale and hearty, taking care of your health and your studies. I know you were waiting for this video, so here we are with an all new video. You must have heard people saying this is a thing of the past. What does it mean? It simply means that something which has no relevance in our present. But does it really happen? Well, I beg to differ. I believe our past gives us a very strong foundation in our present. The what, where, how, and when. These are the 4 questions which answer all our queries. And that's what we are going to do today. Chapter number 1 from your class 6 history books. What, where, how, and when. Let's do it. This year we will study history in class 6. History is an integral part of social science. Social science helps at understanding analytical various phenomena in the immediate social environment. History tells us how contemporary world evolved. It tells us about the past of our present. In your books you can see a girl named Rashida. She is reading newspaper at home. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a small headline, 100 years ago. How? She wondered. Could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? We will try to find the answer of this question. It is very easy to know as to what had happened yesterday. As for yesterday, we could listen to the radio, watch television, read a newspaper. About last year, we could ask somebody who remembers. But what about long ago? Let us see how it can be done. There are several things we can find out. What people ate, the kinds of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craftspersons, artists, musicians, and scientists. We can also find out about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, the songs they sang. This is a map of South Asia, including the present countries of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka, and the neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Iran, China, and Myanmar. South Asia is often called a subcontinent because altogether it is smaller than a continent. It is very large and is separated from the rest of Asia by seas, hills, and mountains. People have lived along the banks of this river. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers. The Narmada River, also called the Reva, and previously also known as Narbuda. It is also known as Lifeline of Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat for its huge contribution to the state of Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat in many ways. Narmada rises from Amarkantak Plateau near Anuppur district of Madhya Pradesh. It forms a traditional boundary between North India and South India, and flows westwards. People who gathered their food, they knew about the vast wealth of plants in the surrounding forests and collected roots, fruits and other forest produce for their food. They also hunted animals. Now find the Suleiman and Kirthar hills to the northwest. The Suleiman Mountains are the southern extension of the Hindu Kush mountain and rise to form the eastern edge of the Iranian plateau and the northeastern edge of the Balochistan plateau. They are located in the Zabul, Kandahar and Loya Paktia regions of Afghanistan, and in Pakistan they extend over the northern part of Balochistan. And to the east are the Indus Plains, together with the Kirthar Mountains in the southern Pakistan. They form what is known as the Suleiman Kirthar geologic province. Some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 8,000 years ago are located here. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat and cattle and lived in the villages. Let's see the Garo Hills. Garo Khasi Range in Meghalaya. The capital of Meghalaya is Shillong. They are inhabited mainly by the tribal dwellers, the majority of whom are Garo people. These were some of the other areas where agriculture developed. Now let's talk about the Vindhyas in the central India. The Vindhya range, also called Vindhyachal, is complex, discontinuous chain of mountain ridges, hill ranges, highlands and plateaus. From the hills, let's move to the rivers. Let's start with the Indus River. It's also called the Sindhu. This is one of the longest rivers in Asia. It flows through China, Western Tibet, India, Ladakh and Pakistan. Originating in the Tibetan plateau in the vicinity of Lake Mansarovar, the river runs a course through the Ladakh region of India towards Gilgit-Baltistan and then flows in a southerly direction along the entire length of Pakistan to merge into the Arabian Sea near the port city of Karachi in Sindh. It is longest river of Pakistan. Its principal right bank tributaries are the Shyok, the Gilgit and the Kabul, the Gomal and the Kurram. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the bank of these rivers. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the banks of Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coasts. In ancient times, the area along the Ganga and its tributary rivers to the south of Ganga was known as Magda, which is now lying in the state of Bihar. Men and women moved in search of livelihood and also to escape from natural disasters like floods or droughts. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundreds of years. Ganga and its tributary called the Son. Throughout, people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to another. The hills and high mountains, including the Himalayas, deserts, river sand seas, made journeys dangerous at times, but never impossible. So men and women moved in search of livelihood. we also sometimes men marched in armies conquering other lands. Besides, merchants traveled with caravans or ships carrying valuable goods from place to place, and religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instructions and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these led to the sharing of ideas between people. People from across the frontiers also came into the subcontinent and settled here. These movements of people enriched our cultural traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundred years. Okay, let's try to know why do we call our country India or Bharat. Two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. Find Iran and Greece in your atlas. The Iranians and Greeks who came through the northwest about 2500 years ago, and they were familiar with the Indus. They called it the Hindos or Indos, and the land to the east of river was called India. The name Bharat was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest and who are mentioned in the Rig Veda. The earliest composition in Sanskrit dated to about 3500 years ago. Later, it was used for the country. Now let's see, how do we find our past? There are several ways of finding out our past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. These are called manuscripts because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. These were usually written on palm leaf or on the specially prepared bark of a tree known as the birch, which grows in Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by the insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects: religious beliefs and the practices, the lives of kings, medicine and science. Besides, there were epics, poems, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit, others were in Prakrit and Tamil. We can also study inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surfaces such as stone or a metal. Sometimes kings got their order inscribed so that the people could see and read and obey them. There are other kind of inscriptions as well, where men and women recorded what they did. For example, kings often kept record of the victories in a battle. There were many other things that were made and used in the past. Those who study these subjects are called archaeologists. They study the remains of buildings made of stone and brick, paintings and sculptures. They also explore and excavate to find tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone, others of bone, baked clay or metal. Objects that are made of hard, imperishable substances usually survive for a long time. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Now let's take up the difference between manuscript and inscription. On your screen you can see two pictures. A manuscript is a document written by hand. On the other hand, an inscription is a written work which is dug on a rock or any solid surface. A manuscript, if it is written on a soft surface like palm leaf, bark of a birch tree, paper, parchment, then its protection is a little difficult. On the other hand, for an inscription, it was written on the walls of hard surface such as rocks, stones, caves, pillars. Therefore, it is durable and conservation requires no special effort. A manuscript can be easily rewritten. On the other hand, for an inscription, if it is written on a hard surface, it will require time and effort to recreate it. A manuscript is not preserved properly, it can soon be destroyed. An inscription, if it is engraved on a hard surface, it is easy to preserve. A manuscript can be easily modified because it is written on a soft surface. On the other hand, an inscription cannot be easily modified because it is written on a hard surface like a stone. The examples of a manuscript include Vedas, Puranas, Abhigyan Shakuntalam, Sangam literature, Arthashastra of Kautilya. For inscription, we take up Ashoka's inscription, Allahabad pillar, Mahanaman inscription of Bodh Gaya, Loh pillar of Delhi, Rishtal inscription, Buddha image inscription of Dhaneshwar Kheda. Now let's take up one past or many. We have used the word past in plural to draw attention to the fact that the past was different from different groups of people. For example, the lives of herders or farmers were different from those of kings and queens. The lives of merchants were different from those of craft persons, and so on. Also, as is true even today, people followed different practices and customs in different parts of the country. For example, today, most people living in the Andaman Islands get their own food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on others for supply of food. Differences such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and the battles they fought because they kept records of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing folk, gatherers, farmers or herders did not keep record of what they did. While archaeology helps us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. We have seen that inscriptions are written on hard surfaces. Many of these were written several hundred years ago. All inscriptions contain both scripts and languages. Languages which were used as well as scripts have changed over time. So how do scholars understand what was written? This can be done through a process known as decipherment. One of the most famous story of decipherment comes from Egypt, a country in North Africa where there were kings and queens about 5,000 years ago. Rosetta is a town on the north coast of Egypt, and here an inscribed stone was found which contained inscriptions in 3 different languages and scripts, Greek and 2 forms of Egyptians. Scholars who could read Greek figured out that the names of the kings and queens were enclosed in a little frame called crochet. They then placed the Greek and the Egyptian signs side by side and identified the sounds for which the Egyptian letters stood. As you can see, a lion stood for L and a bird for an A. Once they knew that the letter stood for, they could read other inscriptions as well. I hope today's session answered some of your queries. When it's about question and answer, so let's analyze what we have learnt today. Let's get going. Okay. On your screen, you can see some words. You have to match the correct words with the correct option. Talking about Narmada Valley, it is known for hunting and gathering. Magda, the first big kingdom. Garo Hills, known for early agriculture. Indus and its tributaries. These were the first cities. Ganga Valley, cities about 2500 years ago. Okay, let's see. What is the difference between manuscript and inscription? One major difference between manuscript and inscription is that manuscripts are handwritten books, records of the past. They were usually found on palm leaves or barks of the trees. On the other hand, inscriptions are writings engraved on hard surfaces such as stone or metal. Alright, now let's take up some questions. You have 4 options to it. You have to pick the correct option. Your first question is, when did agriculture start? Your options are 4700 years ago, 2500 years ago, 8000 years ago, or 5500 years ago. Correct answer, agriculture started 8000 years ago. Alright, moving on. Which river's bank did the people live along in the ancient times? Ganga, Narmada, Satluj, or none of these? Narmada it is. On which river's bank were the cities developed about 2500 years ago? Ganga, Yamuna, Narmada, or all of these? Correct, it is Ganga. Last question. Which city was established on the banks of Ganga? Magda, Vindhyas, both A and B? None of these. Correct answer, it was Magda, which was established on the banks of the river. Hope you liked it. Well, we'll be back with another video. Till then, take care of yourself. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep reading. Namaskar.